Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm your host, Jonathan Grabowski. It is spring 2021 local election season, and we are going through all the contested races, the selectmen's race and the school committee race. And so joining me on the show today is the incumbent candidate, one of the incumbent candidates for Marshfield Public School Committee, and that's Sean Costello. Sean, thanks for joining us.
John, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. It's good to see you. It's been a while, but always appreciate the chance to chat with you.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a wide variety of items today, ranging from what's going on in the schools the past year. Let's kick it off with, for those that don't know you, who is Sean Costello?
Sure. So first of all, I want to thank you guys at MCTV for making sure that something like this can still happen and that information can get to voters and the people in the town, especially during a pandemic. You mentioned we're going to talk about the past year. I think we could do a whole hour program on the past year and just everything that's gone on. But so I appreciate the chance to be here. I am a lifelong Marshfield resident. I love this town. I live in Wrexham now. Graduated from Marshfield High School 11 years ago in class of 2010 and graduated from Stonehill College in 2014. Had the pleasure of serving on the school committee for the last 6 years. It's a great position to hold for me. I think we have been able to do a lot of good things with the schools, and education has just always been a passion of mine. So it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of work, but it's certainly something that I'm lucky to do.
Talk about some of your community involvement and groups you work with. You're pretty active and engaged in the community.
Sure. So obviously education always takes number one priority for me in what I do with the town, and something I've done longer than being on the school committee is for the past 10 years now I've volunteered with Marshfield High School's Youth and Government Club. I have about 50 plus students every year participate, grades 9 to 12 at Marshfield High. It's a nonpartisan club, so they're anywhere on the political spectrum, and they really are anywhere on the political spectrum. It's funny to see them debate with each other, but we're a civics group, and we teach kids the importance of respectful exchange of ideas in government and how that can positively impact people. Because obviously we see this huge issue nationally and all around different pockets of the country where politics can be kind of nasty in a lot of ways, and we're trying to change that at the local level. So we're a state program, work with the kids there, take them to a state conference every year. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that this year because of the pandemic, but I can't wait once this is all over to get back there with my kids. I really miss my students.
So you joined school committee in 2015. What made you decide to run back then?
Sure. So like I said, I'm a lifelong resident here. School education has always been a passion of mine. I actually was approached by Marty Morrison, who had served on the committee for 12 years at that point and is a dear friend. And she said, look, I'm not going to run for re-election. I think you should consider it. It was a contested election back then. I had been involved with the schools up to that point, like I said, with youth and government, but had also been highly involved with the campaign for a new Marshfield High School. I was the secretary of the new MHS committee and knocked on thousands of doors to make residents aware of why we were doing what we were doing, trying to get this beautiful new building that we have here. And I was 19 years old at the time and kept driving back every weekend from college and some weeknights when I didn't have class to try and contribute to that effort. Obviously, we won 70-30 thanks to the town of Marshfield. We've got this beautiful new facility, and I had graduated from college. I had been back and working full time, and just kind of thought to myself, well, maybe I could, make an impact here. Maybe I could be that voice, that fresh perspective that we needed on the committee at the time. So that was an honor to be elected back in 2015 and re-elected in 2018.
Yeah. So if you could jump in the time machine back to 2015 when you first got elected, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would probably I'd have a lot of advice for myself, but I'd probably tell myself not to take criticism personally. Sometimes people have certain opinions on education, and obviously when you're educating over 4,000 students townwide, There's going to be people who think some things can be done differently. It's our job to listen to those concerns, and people get passionate about education. And that's a really good thing when people get passionate about their public education. So I'd probably give that advice to myself. I'd probably tell myself to make sure that we're doing everything we can to work with every group of stakeholders in every decision that we make. And I think we've done a really good job over the past 6 years. But the number one advice I'd give to myself is to keep that open mind and remember that passion for education is a really good thing. I have it. The rest of the committee has it. Parents have it too.
What have been some of the accomplishments? A lot's gone on over that 6 years.
Yeah, we've been able to accomplish a whole lot of great things. I'm very proud of it. I've been the chair of the committee for over 4 years of the 6 years that I've served, and have worked very closely with all 4 of my colleagues and with Superintendent Granatino and our leadership team. Chief among our accomplishments that I always like to make sure we say first is the implementation of universal tuition-free full-day kindergarten. That is something that when Kendra Campbell and I first ran back in 2015, we heard a whole lot about from people who wanted to make sure that that became a reality. In Massachusetts, there's so many districts that have it, but Marshfield and the South Shore as a whole were kind of like a holdout. There was no full-day kindergarten. There was an optional program for it, but it cost $3,000 per parent or per student. So the families would have to spend that $3,000 if they wanted their kids to have what is a very clear educational benefit in full-day kindergarten. So we started planning for that right away. Things like that take a couple years to plan, and we were able to implement it starting in the 2018 to 2019 school year without raising taxes, without cutting programs, and without cutting positions.
How'd you pull that off? That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and kudos goes to a ton of different people. Of course, the rest of the committee, the Superintendent Granatino, our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance, Tom Miller, our Assistant Super, Dr. Ellen Martin, just all these people that contributed to this effort. It's something that you plan years in advance, and you start to, you incorporate it into your financial plan, and then the committee and the leadership take a look at the financial plan and determine what is going to be our priority items on that. And it takes a lot of finagling. It takes looking at the budget and saying, what can we do with this? What can we do with this? And we were able to successfully do that, and I'm very proud of that. I think it's been a huge benefit for our students the last few years, and will continue to be a huge benefit for students in the years to come.
There's a few other neat things you've done over the past few years, you and the school committee, one-to-one technology,
yes,
elementary health, furnace brick roof. Talk about some of that stuff.
Sure. So I'm glad you mentioned the one-to-one technology, because that's something that I'm really proud of as well. And just as Marshfield was a leader on full-day kindergarten, becoming one of the first towns in the South Shore, I think the first town in the South Shore area to do for full-day kindergarten for all of our students, we were one of the first towns in the area to do a one-to-one technology initiative, where all the way back in 2015 and 2016, we implemented a one-to-one program at the high school where every student was given a tablet. It's a Chromebook, and it really brought the curriculum in our day-to-day educational operations into the 21st century. We've been able to expand that to the middle school, and the next step is to look at how we can expand technology and integration into the elementary school.
Excellent. There's a lot of subcommittee liaison roles, that take place in the school committee. What are some of those roles you've had over the past 6 years?
Sure, and I don't mean to not answer that right away, but I realize I didn't talk about a couple of things that you had mentioned in the last question.
No.
An elementary health teacher, as you had said, is something that was really important to the rest of the committee. Back in 2008, 2009, it had been cut due to the financial crash back then, and for over 10 years it was not reinstated, and we were able to reinstate it a couple years ago. That's something that took a lot of pushing for as well. And the Furnace Brook Roof Project is something we're really proud of. That was clearly a need that we saw, and just getting that project done and having it done with nearly 80% of the vote from the town to approve that means that we can dramatically extend the life of that building and make sure that it's as functional as possible on behalf of not just the students and the teachers in that building, but the taxpayers. So that's something we're proud of. In terms of your question that you did just ask, the various liaisons and assignments that I've been able to hold throughout my time on the school committee, like I said, the big ones being the chair of the committee, which I'm doing now and have been doing for the last couple years and had a chance to do for a couple of years before that. That's a position where I work as hard as I can to build a consensus with the rest of the membership and make sure that we're putting people into subcommittees and roles where their strengths are played to, and also where they can learn and grow as well, because when they do that, the district does the same thing. So I've been, right now I'm sitting on the budget subcommittee, so Kendra Stetson-Campbell and I are actually working together on the school district budget for FY22. That's something that we'll be asking the town to approve at town meeting in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Can't believe that's coming up
I know
already.
it is.
I am also on the policy subcommittee. I've been on the policy subcommittee all 6 years that I've served, and something I'm really proud of that we've done there is myself and Rich Greer, who also sat on the committee, and Superintendent Granatino went through every single district policy that we have and updated them, and we made changes to make sure that the language is kind of more uniform and that it all fits together well, and that we're all up to date with the state mandates and codes that we have to be up to date with. And that was a huge task to take on, and it took multiple full school committee meetings to approve all of the work that we had done. It was a months-long process, but that's something I'm proud that we've done. I've also been a liaison in the past to the Marshfield Education Foundation. We each have a school council. I've sat on the Marshfield High School School Council, Daniel Webster, and just a few other
little bit of
assignments
everything.
like that. Exactly, and that's something that I think folks don't recognize at first, is that when you're elected to a position like this, you do get to do a little bit of everything. You have your areas of focus, but there's also a pretty broad range of things that you're expected to do.
So why have you decided to seek a third term?
So that's a good question. I was in middle of trying to accomplish a lot of things back when the pandemic hit. There's still a lot of things that I'd like to see done on the committee side and throughout the district. I took a look at the state, and obviously it's a decision that you always have to take a step back and say, am I still the right person for this? Is the community supportive of that? If you're not doing it for the people that you serve, then you're not doing it for the right reasons. And I heard from a lot of people who had expressed support and decided that because of the pandemic and with everything else that I had hoped to accomplish, that it was the right decision to move forward and try and seek a third term and ask the people to continue to put their trust in me. We're going to be coming out of a global pandemic. Things in a lot of respects, understandably so, have come to a complete halt. Mm-hmm. And once we get out of this, we're going to need that experienced, proven, steady leadership in order to keep Marshfield moving forward. We've been doing a great job of moving forward over the past however many years. And now, once everything is back to normal, as normal as it can be, and hopefully one day, back to normal sincerely, we need to be able to move forward with the schools. I think getting back to normal starts in the schools, and that's why it's a great thing to see that all of our students K-12 are back with live instruction full-time 5 days a week. So that's a really positive step in the right direction, but there's still so much more to do.
A little Civics 101 that we like to do here. So what's the role of the school committee?
Sure, I'm glad you asked that, because again, it's something a lot of people don't know, and it's something that I had to familiarize myself with back in 2015 when I was first running. The school committee has three major functions. Our first is to hire and evaluate the superintendent. Jeff Granatino and I actually came in together. Mm-hmm. He was hired by the committee previous to mine and Kendra's tenure. And I was elected in May of 2015, and he came on in July of 2015. We have a great leader in Jeff Granatino. I think the world
Absolutely.
of him, and the work that he does is just, it's outstanding. We're very, very lucky to have him here. So that's one of our major duties. The others are setting district policy, which I touched on earlier, mm-hmm. and the work that we had done on updating those. And the third would be the budget. Which obviously our budget is over $50 million per year here in Marshfield Public Schools for about 4,000 students. It's our job to take a look at that budget, set our priorities, and bring a number to the town through the Board of Selectmen, through the Advisory Board, and finally to town meeting, and ask them to approve our budget and the direction that we see Marshfield Public Schools going in for the next year.
So our good friend Arnie Briggs always used to talk about this. He's a former school committee member.
Sure.
He used to host the show. He goes, with school committee, you don't just show up to
Right.
the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
He used to talk about the packet,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess now is a digital packet
Yes.
you get on a Sunday night. So talk about the work that goes on.
Sure, and you know what? You couldn't have used a better example. Arnie Briggs is like one of the greatest guys.
Yeah.
I think the world of him, He's just been a good friend and mentor to me throughout the years. It certainly is a whole lot of work. We probably put in anywhere from 10 to 25 hours a week, depending on the workload. Sometimes during the summer that tends to be a little lower. But we have a lot to do. We have to review all of the new policies that come forward. There are certain things that are required to come before the school committee. We meet once every 2 weeks, if not more than that. Certainly this past year has been the busiest year. You mentioned the packet, and you're right. That's another accomplishment. It's a tiny little victory, but I'm glad that we did it. We transitioned from getting a huge, thick packet every week to having it all digital. So that's good for the environment. That's a really good thing. The packet is full and every week, and sometimes it's a whole lot of different things. You should see our budget binder is huge. We can go through item by item and look at the line items of the school budget, and it's just there's something new every meeting, and it takes a lot of collaborative work. It takes reaching out to leaders in the district. It takes communicating constantly. I communicate as the chair constantly with Superintendent Granatino. We talk 4 or 5 times a week. There's just, we get kept updated on certain things that go on in the district, and it's a huge caseload. When I first got elected, it was a little daunting, of course, as anything would be. But we've really got a good hold of it the last few years, and I think we had hit our stride, and we're doing some great things before the pandemic hit.
Many people know that you work for State Rep Bruce Ayers out of Quincy. Are there things that you can take out of working at the State House and bring it back to the school committee?
Absolutely. So my full-time job for about 7 years now has been at the State House. I work in the state legislature. I'm the legislative director for Representative Ayers, as you said, from Quincy. Another great guy. We have a certain caseload of bills that we file every legislative session, and we push for those. And of course, we also work with various state agencies, and we work on the state budget. So it's kind of cool to know, the various intricacies of how that works. I think it's been a real value to the school committee to know how we can advocate for certain state funds, to know how we can look into certain programs that are run by the state that we could take advantage of, to know just how policy works, and to be able to do policy as a full-time job, and look at that from a school committee perspective and say, okay, we want to accomplish this. What kind of policy needs to be in place in order for us to do that? What kind of policy would we need to be complying to in order to do that? We like I said, every year we work on the state budget there. It actually coincides pretty nicely with working on the local budget here. It's funny, every year whenever we get our allocation for Chapter 70 funds from the state, Tom Miller, our assistant superintendent, always sends out the number that Marshfield gets as soon as he can. But because the state sends it out to all the state reps right before they send it to the districts, I always have a chance to look at it and just kind of know what's coming down the pike there. So that's always a good thing too, is to be able to help our people here, people like Tom, who we trust implicitly, to make sure he's doing the best possible job he can, to do his job to the best of his ability. So that's just one of the many benefits, I guess, of working in that position. It's a great job to have. Another benefit, before I let you ask your next question, is the constituent services aspect of it. I work a lot with folks who call into our office on a daily basis who need assistance. Sometimes, and this may shock you, sometimes the state doesn't function the way it should.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know people, their mind is blown when they hear that. but there's always an issue, and it's our job to navigate through that issue. My job really isn't very political in nature. It's to help people navigate through the state system and make sure they're getting the benefits they deserve and the programs that they need access to. And that's something that I bring to the school committee as well. I hear from a whole lot of parents, a whole lot of concerned people, especially throughout the last year. And we've done our very best to get back to people as quickly as possible, and not just provide them with a generic, cookie cutter response, but make sure that we're giving them an email or a phone call, and directly responding to the concern or the question that they've posed. That's something that I'd like to continue doing on the school committee as well.
So, what's the current state of the Marshfield Public Schools as of today?
So that's a good question. I think I think there's two separate answers to that.
Okay.
Because a year and a month ago, we froze in time, along with every other district across the state, across the country, across the world. Every school froze in time when the pandemic first hit. And certainly it ends up taking all of your attention. So the state of Marshfield Public Schools right now is two different things. The first state is that we are outperforming our neighboring towns in terms of getting our students back to full-time live education and instruction. That's something we're all really proud of. We were able to do that. We had our elementary students back safely, and safely is always a key word here, safely. We had these discussions throughout time, and of course worked with our Marshfield Education Association, the teachers union, and our leadership to make sure that everybody had a seat at the table. Parents, students, everybody was involved in these planning processes. But we look at the fact that Marshfield was back to elementary education, K to 5 days a week, 4 days a week with the Wednesday break had built in, back in February. And that's something that no other district in this area had been able to accomplish as of that point. Starting on this past April 5th, we had everybody else back, and we transitioned the elementary schools from a 4-day schedule to 5. So our students are all back. That's a really, really great thing. So I think that's a big part of the state. Obviously, it's been a weird year for education, and that's something that is just the byproduct of a pandemic. And I think our educators, our staff, have done a phenomenal job educating our students to the best of their ability. I want to make sure folks at home recognize that our teachers really have sacrificed so much this year. We've depended on them for so much, and they've delivered. And not just that, but our students. We've expected a whole lot of our students during a really tough time, and they should be commended as well. So the state of Marshfield Public Schools in that respect is that we're doing the very best we can with that side of things. In the other respect, the state of Marshfield Public Schools is, if you go to the first week of March back in 2020, and you look at where we were going, we were rolling. We were doing a lot of great things. I think it should be noted for folks that out of 320 school districts in the entire state of Massachusetts, Marshfield is like number 290 or something like that, around that area, in terms of how much funding we devote per student to our public education. 290 out of 320. Despite that, we have vastly outperformed the schools that surround us in those rankings. And we've outperformed schools that are ranked much higher than us. Yeah. And that is because of a couple things. It's because of the community believing in what we do here in Marshfield Public Schools. It's the students and their motivation. And it's the teachers and it's our staff who have done such a great job with limited resources. And we've been going to the town for the last few years to get some budget increases, and they have graciously given that to us. And the community is recognizing the issue there and has started to work with us and step up and fund the schools. So despite that ranking, we've been doing incredibly well. And like I said, the full day kindergarten is a perfect example. Despite that low ranking in terms of how we fund our public education, we were able to figure out a way to do full day kindergarten. So I think the state of our public schools in that respect, and once we're out of this pandemic and out of the woods, is that we've been doing a lot of really great work. And it takes buy-in from everybody in the district, and we've been able to receive that. So I think the state of Marshfield Public Schools is in good shape, especially after a strange year in which a lot of unfortunate things have unfolded beyond anybody's control. I think when we look at the positives and we look at what we'll be able to do once we're out of the woods here and what we were doing beforehand, I think Marshfield Public Schools will continue to be a point of pride for this community.
What's something that, in your mind, something the school committee does well and something that you wish, hey, we'd like to improve upon this?
Sure. So I think my answer to both of those questions will be the same thing. Okay. I think we communicate very well. I think we communicate, as just a little school committee bubble, and we work well together. I think we communicate with parents and with families in a very open fashion. Whenever folks reach out to us, we're always happy to talk. I think our superintendent has shown the same, commitment to maintaining that communication with families and with students and, everybody who has a stake in our education, our teachers and the union. I think our leadership as a whole has maintained that communication. But communication is the most important thing. So when you look at what we could also be doing better,
Mhm.
you can always improve.
Right.
There's always room for improvement. I think, there's always questions that exist out there,
Right.
and any way that we can get information out as quickly and efficiently as possible is helpful to the central mission of Marshfield Public Schools. So I think that would be my answer there.
COVID-19's impacted everything.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your thoughts on how the school department's handled dealing with it. And you're in a really unique position because you've been the chair of the school committee.
Sure. So I always think back to, we had a school committee meeting, I think it might have been the 12th of March, something like that, Tuesday, March 12th, 2020. And we had a couple things on the agenda, and COVID had just started really dominating the news cycle. And people were saying, I don't know what's going to happen here. And 2 days later is when Marshfield Public Schools went remote.
Right.
So I always think back to that meeting, because I think we had some sort of impending sense of this big thing was coming, but I don't think we really knew the gravity of it. This is something that nobody has ever had to face before. Mm-hmm. And God willing, they'll never have to face it again. This is certainly not what I expected when I ran for the school committee. And I think all 5 of us could say the same thing, that none of us ever in a million years thought we would be dealing with a global pandemic and how it impacts education on a local level and across our region and the country. I think given all of that, our leadership team, our superintendent, our principals, and especially our staff and the teachers and the students have really responded as best as they can. We have gone in certain directions that were developed with certain working groups of mm-hmm. teachers, of administrators, students, parents, to determine the best ways to educate students throughout a pandemic. We had been hitting our stride in one of those areas, and of course the state came in mid-January and told us that we needed to change things all of a sudden and meet new guidelines. And teachers, students, everybody in the district, leadership, they rolled with the punches. They adjusted. It was not easy, but they did it, and they're doing it incredibly well. And now, lo and behold, again, we made the decision to go back full-time, again, before most districts in our area and before the state guidelines had us do that. And, of course, we had vaccinated all of our teachers, which is another thing I'm really proud of. I think that's a huge feather in the cap of Marshfield Public Schools, that we were able to, as far as I can see, I don't see any other district in the state that had vaccinated teachers before we did. So I'm really proud of that. That's a nice thing to look back on 10, 20 years from now and say our district was able to do that throughout a pandemic. But, with all of those factors included, we've been able to go back, and teachers and staff have responded once again incredibly well. So I think Marshfield Public Schools as a whole, Marshfield Public Schools isn't disproportionately me and the rest of the committee and Jeff Granatino. That's not it. There's thousands of people who make up Marshfield Public Schools. Mm-hmm. And it takes a community effort to get through something this major, something this monumental. And I'm really, really proud of how our district handled that, how our people handled that. And I think when I look back on the decisions that I was tasked with making, again, 10, 20 years down the road, I'm going to say, I made the best decision possible with the best available information at the time, with consulting medical experts, with consulting our Board of Health, with consulting our educational experts, with looking at all these various studies and things. I'm going to be able to say that, using all of that information, I made the best decisions that I thought possible for our students, with our students in mind, and with their health, and with the health of our staff and their families as well in mind. And I'll be able to sleep easy because of that. Right. There's always things that you look back on and you say, certain things unfolded a certain way. And again, I think I'll be able to look back on it and say I'm proud of the way we handled it.
One question before we get into the rapid fire stuff at the end here. Mm-hmm. So a question I've been asking all the candidates is the educational experience. We all know teachers, that, and the things they're going through, and talking to friends and loved ones who are teachers. Do you think we give local districts? We should be giving teachers, local districts, more control of what's taught in the classroom, Or do we really need state and federal mandates? You know, something you hear from teachers sometimes is I'm teaching to a test, or
Right.
I have to teach this unfunded mandate. You know,
Right.
So I want to get your thoughts on that.
That's another great question, and you know, I'll make a couple points there. Is first of all, I have the utmost faith in our educators, and I think this past year, you know, we've done everything we can to display that faith, and the educational model that we followed was developed in large part by our staff and the educational experts that are in front of the classroom every day. There's always going to be state mandates.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be guidelines that we have to meet. You know, Marshfield has a tendency to outperform, you know, consistently outperform, you know, the benchmarks that are set by the state and the federal government. So we're really proud of that. In terms of unfunded mandates, one of the things that we established during my time as chair was actually a working group on unfunded mandates to take a look at that. And our district has been pretty outspoken against certain mandates that come down from the state that are unfunded. You know, that's something that I sincerely hope will begin to change. You mentioned standardized testing too. It's actually the first issue that I took on as a member of the school committee back in 2015. There was the big push back then to change MCAS testing, and there was this whole new system. It was a whole set of new rigorous standardized testing. It was called PARC testing. It was the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Career. And you know, there was a big push by the state to shift over to PARC testing, which I thought would have caused a lot of undue stress for our students, undue burden for them, and undue burden for our teachers as well. So I wrote a resolution, first thing I did on the school committee, and passed that resolution unanimously through our school committee that called on the state to reject PARC testing. Yep. That became a framework for resolutions that were used across the state by school committees, and we kind of created that coalition to push back on the state and say, hey, look, we don't want this. You know, this isn't right for our students. This isn't right for our teachers. It's not right for our educational community. And the state decided not to implement PARC testing. So that's a good question. I think that our teachers and our educational staff have shown they know what they're doing. You know, the most sacred thing in public education in any town is the aspect of local control. So I think the job that I have is such an important one, and why I take it incredibly seriously. So when we have the ability to impact certain things and to make good things happen for our students, I think it's our obligation to do that.
Great. So we're running short on time, so we're going to go rapid fire on these last few questions.
Yep.
So if reelected, what's one thing you want to work on?
Implementing our financial plan. We've got a whole lot of different bullets on there that I hope folks will take a look at. Some of it involves our transportation structure and our tiered elementary start times. Some of it involves the expansion of technology programs, the expansion of elementary reading and math programs, and you know, facilities updates to our sidewalks, things like that. There's a whole lot of things.
All right. What's a Sean Costello fun fact?
I like to kayak. I love to kayak. I can't wait to get the kayak in the water once the weather turns just a little bit nicer. But I'll you know, kayak every chance I get when the weather's nice.
If we were to steal your phone, what music would we find on it?
A lot of Bruce Springsteen. A whole lot of Bruce Springsteen. If there's a song Bruce Springsteen recorded, it's on my phone.
Okay. If people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Sure. So if people, and I'll look at the camera as I say, if people want to find out more about me, you can go to my website, which is www.seanformarshfield.com. Or if you'd like to bypass all of that, my cell phone number is 781-799-1817. Always happy to talk.
There's bravery among certain candidates when they give out their cell phone numbers.
Well, you know what? There's nothing more important than the education of your child and the public education of your community. It impacts everything. So I want folks to know they can call me.
All right. So last but certainly not least, why are you the best candidate for the position?
So I think there's two reasons why I'd be the best candidate for that position. Is first and foremost the work that we've done over the last 6 years. You know, I think I've demonstrated that I'm the candidate that has the leadership, the knowledge, the experience necessary that we're going to need to move past the pandemic and keep Marshfield education moving forward. And the second point is I think that I'm the most passionate person for this job. Working with my good friend Kendra Stetson Campbell, and obviously folks get 2 votes, and I certainly hope they'll vote for myself and for Kendra because we've formed such a great team. We're both so passionate about what we do here But there's nothing more important than a strong public education. It can impact everything. It can make a difference in everything at an individual level for students, but on a town-wide level as well. So we understand that, and we're passionate about making that good change. So I hope folks will continue to put their trust in me and vote for me on Saturday, May 1st.
Well, Sean, we want to thank you for joining us today and want to wish you the best of luck on Election Day.
Thank you, John. Always appreciate the chance to be here.
And that's all the time we have for Meet the Candidates. And until next time, make it a great day.